It's the headers from the table. And what is it using as the headers for the table? It's effectively just using the column names. So when we run this, and go to movies, it's getting that from the column names. Now, that's something to keep in mind, because we don't always want our column names to be used as headers, right? Because sometimes you abbreviate in column names, all right? This case isn't too bad. About the only one I would say that is bad is release date. It's run together. There should be a space between release and date. All right? So how do we go about changing that? How do we change the column name? Let's see if we can figure that out. Okay, this looks like it shows me how to do it. All right, we'll see if it works. We can change the display name for something. So let's go in and in the model, I'll really go out on a limb and change it to date released. And there we go. Comes out the date released. All right. This brings up sort of an extension of what I said before. Please, don't ever tell me that ASP.NET did that. All right? So if I say, well, your column name is, I don't understand the column name because it's RLSDT. I don't understand what that means. And you say, oh, well, ASP.NET did that. That's not an excuse. All right? It's your code. ASP.NET, the scaffolding aspect, does a lot for you, but it's still your code. There's an old saying, something like, it's a poor craftsman that blames the tools. You know, you wouldn't take and say, well, here's this table, and one of the legs is too short, and say, well, you know, the saw made it too short. No, the saw didn't make it too short. You made it too short. All right? Same idea here. All right? If you don't know how to do something, try to do some research on how to do it. Honest to God. I had no clue how to change that. I probably shouldn't admit that. I should probably keep up the illusion that I know everything, all right? But I don't, right? I don't know how to change that. But I know that you probably can change it, right? That's a reasonable thing to ask for. And therefore, probably someone on Google knows how to change it, all right? So I went out, Googled it, and found it. Now, to be sure, that kind of stuff is a skill, right? I haven't been working in this framework for that long, the ASP.NET Core, but I have been a software developer forever, literally before probably a lot of you were born, all right? And that experience kind of helps because you kind of have a sense of like, gee, what do I Google and all that? And that's fine. So if you're having trouble figuring something out, don't think, oh, he gets the answers like that. It takes me a few minutes and I still don't have the answers. Don't feel bad about that, all right? That's just the fact that I've been doing this forever, On occasion, a student will tell me, wow, you found that error so quick. You know what that usually means? It usually means I made that error 15,000 times, so I can recognize it very quickly when someone else makes it. All right? Isn't that I have some kind of sense for this? It's just that I've done this so long. So the point is that some of these things might be harder for you to figure out, all right, simply because you haven't been familiar with this kind of thing as long as I have. But you'll get there. Believe me, you'll get there. And that's why I'm here, all right? If you are stuck with something, don't sit there banging your head against the table saying, oh, God, let me try this, let me try that, let me try that. Try it for a while. It's admirable that you want to figure it out on your own. But if you run into difficulty, ask the question. All right? Ask, gee, why, I can't seem to find out how to change the name. And I'll work with you to find it out. All right? The bottom line, though, is remember, this is your page, and these tools help you create them, but it's still your page, and it's your responsibility to make it work the way that we want it to work. Okay. Now, I'm going to take this a slightly different direction. All right? Notice this page. All these things are just plain old text, right? There's a link for details. And when I click it, notice what it does. It says details ID equals 1. All right? And that's cool. It takes us more. Because we might have a case where we only want to display a few things on this page and we show all the details on this page. This is a very small table. There's only like 4 columns. But if you imagine there's 20 columns in this table, we might not want to show all 20 of them on the list, but we would want to show all 20 of them over here. What would it take, and let's play this in our mind. Let's think about this. What would it take to make it so that if I clicked on the title, it took me to this details page? Let's think about that for a second. Let's go and look at the code in the list. Yeah.
Wouldn't you move the link for the details to the title, the A tag?
Okay, good thought. All right, this clearly is the link that takes me to that details page, right? So I'm going to go and either copy it or cut it. I'm going to copy it just in case I do it wrong. I still have the original, it works. All right, and I'm going to copy it right here. All right, anything else I have to do?
You have to put the HTML line
Exactly. All right, let's think this through. Remember, the way these work is that there's a mix of plain old HTML and stuff that comes from the model. Okay? And the stuff that comes from the model starts with the @ sign. And the plain old HTML, well, that's plain old HTML. All right? So, if we wanted that name to be a link, we have to wrap that name in a tag. All right? And in our case, we had an example of what that a tag should look like. Right? It is simply calling the details page, and it is giving us, and it is using a route ID of the item ID. And if we do this, since it worked on the details line, it should work up here. The only difference is the name is going to be the link instead of that. All right, it's a link. We click on it, there it goes. All right, pretty easy. All right, just by thinking, well, this CSS HTML page has some parts that are static, some parts that are generated by the server. We're able to go and figure that out. I'm going to cheat a little bit. All right, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to change the genre to an image. Okay? I'm not going to go and rename the column in the database. All right? But I'm going to put an image name in there. So let's go find an image of Star Wars. This will probably take the rest of the class, because I'll look and I'll say, no, I like that picture of Yoda better, or whatever. So, pardon me? Touche. Well, just for that, I'm definitely doing a picture of Yoda. No, you know what? You know what? Just for that, I'm going to do a picture of Dumbledore. I used to do that to my kids all the time when they were little. Like if we were seeing the Lord of the Rings, I would say, like, is this, you know, oh, and like in who's the wizard? Lord of the Rings? Pardon me? Gandalf, yeah. I would say, like, oh, look at Dumbledore over there, and they would be outraged and all that. So, all right, let's find a good picture of Dumbledore. This is good. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to put in the genre the name of the image. And I'm going to rename the image name just to make my typing easier. Where is this image going to go? Is it going to go in the pages, or is it going to go into www root? www root. Why? Because it's good to go to the client. No processing required. I'm going to put that in there. All right. I'm going to go and run this. What I'm doing here. Go and run this. And I'm going to edit this guy, and I'm going to change the genre to be the name of the image. If I was doing this from scratch, of course I would make an image column that was a string, right? We're not going to be storing an image in the database. We're going to store the name of the image, because that's what a web page needs. It needs the name of the image. All right. But again, just to be difficult or simple or whatever, I'm going to just use that. I could go and change the name of genre, the display name, right, in the model, just like I did with release date, if I really wanted to. Okay. In fact, let's do that. Good practice. All right, there we go. Okay, now the question becomes, what would it take for us to show the actual image and not the name of the image on this page? Okay, there it is. What would it take for us to show that? Need an image tag. So we're going to go here. Remember, mix of plain old HTML and this ASP.NET stuff from the model. Okay. Now, here's one thing I do. You're absolutely right. But let's say I was confused about how to do this. All right? What I would do first is I would hard code the image. And I would say image src equals images Star Wars all equals image of Star Wars. All right? I hard-coded it because I know that somewhere in this page there's going to be HTML that's going to look like that. It's not going to look exactly like that because I'm going to have to go and replace some stuff with some ASP.NET code. But I know for a start that's what I need. That's what I need to accomplish. All right? So I'll put that in there. I'll run it. And I'll say, yeah, that worked. All right, that worked. All right. Now, let's go and make it work for real. Because if we had another movie there, it would also show Dumbledore. All right? Or Gandalf or Yoda. Take your pick. All right, so let's go and change it. So what do you think we're going to have to change? Pardon me? The source. What about the source?
Just replace the name of the name of the file to
Yep.
and concatenate the string with the part provided by the ASP.
Yep. I should be able to do this. Do I want to change the alt? You betcha. And I could change the alt a bunch of different ways, but I'm going to change the alt to put image of, I'll put the title of the movie there. So now when I run it, go. If we look at the source, we'll see that what got generated is exactly what I had hard-coded before. So I know I did it right. All right. Viewing the source is very useful, especially when things go wrong. All right. Let's say I got confused. And I did this. All right. Or, yeah, I did this. Probably will still work. Let's see. Say I did. Oh, I don't know. I did that. It's going to show as a broken image. Well, I'm going to sit there, pull my hair out. Oh, it didn't work. Let me try stuff. Well, the best thing to do is look to see what code got generated and set to the browser. So look at what got generated in the browser, and that a lot of times will tell you where you went wrong. So in this case, if I do a view source, I will see remember when it was hard-coded? I had a different URL in there, right? I had ./images/ that, and it showed up as /images. So, somehow I forgot the folder. That's why, again, you could even have them right next to each other. Show the image twice. Show it once with hard-coded HTML code, one with generated by the ASP.NET code. And you could look at the two tags side by side, and if they're different, okay, what do I need to do to make the other one right? And that would be, what was it? ./images?
What was it?
Tilde. What does tilde mean?
It means current directory.
Dot means current directory. That's where I went wrong. Tilde means what?
Folder above.
Dot means folder above.
Time.
Pardon me?
Is it time?
Tilde means home directory, the root directory. So the tilde means starting from the web server's root directory for this project, go to the folder called images. And if you look at it, that's where it is, right? Right underneath www.root is images. Let's make sure it's right. And away we go. The one thing I didn't look at too closely, we sort of jumped into this section before we went into more detail, is for each var item in model movie. What does that mean?
It's doing a for loop where an item variable is set to each item in the model.
model movie. Model movie is what? It's an I-list. All right? An I-list is like an array. All right? So we have a list of movies in our model called movie. All right? We are going to loop through all of them. All right? For each item in that list of movies. And each iteration through the loop, the item is called item. So we get the value of the item title, relating to the title. Value of the item that's named release date, genre, price, and so on. Any questions about this? Clearly, there's a lot we can do with this, right? The point is, though, is that we're not taking the scaffolding stuff and using it as is, right? I'm not saying that will never be the case, but it'll be pretty rare, right? Because it's a very straightforward, simple, vanilla implementation, all right? Typically, we want something different. We want to show images. We want to show links. We want to show maybe related for each movie a list of actors for it underneath it or something like that. So, but we could use these scaffolded things as a head start, right? As a way of getting a way of getting a jump on the game that was something we can build on top of. All right? Any questions about this? Yes?
So for example, you can set a search filter, filter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was even included in a tutorial. So like if you could do a search, and you could search for a particular string. All right? It is important to remember where everything goes. All right? The presentation, the display, is in the CISS file. The data is in the model. And what they call the model for the CSS file is sort of the go-between that connects the two. It gets data from the model and it supplies that to the interface. Now, this is sort of a simplified version of the model view controller paradigm, which is very popular in programming. The only difference between this and the model view controller paradigm, which we might take a look at later on in the semester. I don't know. This is the first time I'm teaching this class this way, so I have to see how everything times out. But the only difference is that instead of having a model for each page, there's a separate controller object that sort of does this, that you could actually share between pages. All right? So there's some advantages of that, and there's some disadvantages of that. All right? Okay, that's all I had for today. I have heard Visual Studio in our lab has been updated. I have not tested that. So if you have any problems completing the tutorial, I know there were some problems last time, but let me know. I will post this up to Canvas. All right, what we're going to do today is I have the tutorial. I did most of it. I didn't do all of it. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the code that was generated, because it's one thing to be able to go and scaffold it and, hey, we got ourselves an application. All right. It gives us a lot, but it doesn't give us everything. All right, so there's definitely going to be the need for us to go and modify the code that it generated. All right, if not in the example in the tutorial, if we were to do a real world example. So for example, if we had a case of kids signing up for Little League and getting assigned to teams, well, we could build the model for that, and we probably will do this example either today or next week maybe. But we could build the table for team, we could build the table for player, and we could have a foreign key column in there between player and team. Now, the way it's going to scaffold it, though, you're going to have to go and enter in the number for the team ID. And that isn't very useful, right? Because who's going to remember the name of which number relates to which team? So what we'd rather see is a neat little drop down where it showed you all the teams and you could select the correct team. Well, the scaffolding doesn't do that, right? Hey, it doesn't do everything for you, but it gives you a start. Think of scaffolding as something that you can climb up on to help you build something. All right? So in order for us to do that and to be able to customize it and to do more than meets the eye, more than is just generated for us, we have to understand the code that's written, and we have to understand how everything relates all together. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're going to go over today. All right. I downloaded this, which I'm not uploading to Canvas because it's your assignment to do it. And I'm not going to give you the files for the solution. You know, hey, I got to draw the line somewhere, right? And I did load it, and as the tutorial mentions, you have to run and update the database after you do that, which I did. So we're ready to roll. All right. First thing to do, or one of the things to do, would be to update the menu. All right? Because we don't have, the menu that's in the layout file gets generated based on the defaults. I'm going to go and I'm going to upload that, or update that rather, to make it work. Let's see. There we go. There's the layout. Couldn't see it at first. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to update it. We're going to look how this works in a second, because one thing I want to do is I want to review how this would look on a mobile device, because I'm kind of curious of that myself. I'm going to get rid of this cookie business because we don't really have any cookies on our site, so we'll get rid of that. I'm going to go and I'm going to change the navigation. I'm going to remove the about, which I guess I could keep, but I'm going to remove the about and the contact and put the movies on here. All right. So the bottom line is, give me a navigation that I can work with. All right. One thing that how do I want to say this? By taking just a little more effort on your assignments, and I don't mean the tutorial one, but like, for example, the assignment that's coming up next week. By taking a little more effort to dot the I's and cross the T's, make sure the navigation is updated, update the default appearance, change the CSS somehow, put your own personal stamp on it. That gives you an opportunity to practice these skills and shows an attention to detail, which is great. It's amazing how sometimes in the Intro to Web Development class. I have a few students this semester who virtually give me back my examples with just a handful of things changed. And you look at that and it's like, well, I suppose they did what I asked them to, but not really, right? So take an extra 10, 15, 20 minutes to really put your personal stamp on it, change the CSS and so on. And we'll do some of that. I'm not going to do all of that here because that would be boring to watch me change CSS, but at least we'll spend a little bit of time talking about it to make it work. So, I got rid of everything in the navigation except the homes and the movies. Notice that in the navigation, the movies, we don't give precise page names, all right? We give folder names, and then the correct one is found within the folder. By default, it's going to be looking for in the folder index.cshtml, and that will be the page that it is going to render. Let's see, is that in any of these files? No. Not really. That's the default of the web server. All right. So, I'm going to go look at the CSS and just play with it. Let's make sure we understand. What's the difference between the stuff in the www root folder and the stuff in the pages folder? If you had to define that difference very simply, what would you say the difference is?
Pages holds the models, and then the root holds the properties.
Okay. The pages hold the CSS/HTML pages and their respective models. That's true. There is a models folder for the actual models, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes here, because we use models a couple different ways here. Anyone else venture? Yeah.
It almost seems like the root is external, where it has to access something else
Okay.
in a different folder, and then the pages is more of an internal type of layout, things that are within the program, like where you have to drop back a folder for the things.
Okay. That's a good observation. If I was going to define it, I would say this. The stuff in the www root folder is the stuff that's ready to go to the client as is. Okay? In other words, what's in there? Images are there. Well, are we going to process images? No. The images are just delivered to the client. CSS. Do we do any processing of the CSS? No. The CSS is CSS. All right? JavaScript that we have. Any libraries. This is stuff that's ready to go to the client as is. All right? It's like if you go down to the cafeteria, which again, I always use food analogies, probably because I'm always hungry, right? And especially this class, it's right before lunch, all right? But you go down to the cafeteria, there's a grab and go section, right? No one has to do anything with it. That turkey sandwich is ready to be delivered to a customer. You just have to grab it out of the bin and go. All right, peanut butter jelly the same way, the boiled eggs, the hummus and pita bread. All that stuff in the grab to go section is already ready to be sent to the client, And that's what is in the www section. The stuff that is elsewhere, for example, the models and the pages formula, has to be processed first by the server. That would be like the line at Subway or the line at the grill or whatever. Bless you. Bless me. Thank you. Whereas The code is not ready to go to the client yet. It has to be processed. All right? So that's what I would distinguish between the two. So the CSS is in there, right? Because the CSS is just good to go. There's no server-side scripting in it. And we can open that guy up, and we can make whatever changes we want to for it. So, I'm just going to make some minor changes. Let's make a background color a very light gray, so pound C. Is that 6? And then a color of a darker gray. Pound 2. All right, so now let's run it. All right. Well, we can see some of it had changed. This was already given a style. Notice our menu is correct, and we can click on movies. And maybe there's a problem. Let's take a look what we did with that. Looks right to me.
Do you have to do pages/movies?
No. Oh, you might be right. No, you shouldn't. Because all these are in the pages folder. Indexes as well. I do think I have to do, you're right. I'm not giving a folder here. I have to say movies / index. Yeah. My bad. You give the folder, but you also have to give the name of the page. You just don't give the .cshtml. And there we go. Yay. All right. So, I would also go and change the index file of the whole site. Because again, this has a lot of stuff in it that we really don't need, right? I mean, we don't need this giant carousel that displays all this data. This isn't a sample page. This should be our finished page. So I'm going to delete all this stuff. I'm going to be ruthless. And I'm just going to put in something like an H1. Welcome to our movie site. All right. Now, you can also make changes to the layout if you want to. The one thing I don't particularly like about the layout is that the layout does not take advantage of HTML5 tags. So that can easily be changed by changing. Well, I stand corrected. It does. It does have a nav, so it does do that. But it also has divs, which again, I typically would not use divs for that, but whatever. All right, so now we run this. Welcome to our movie site. We click on movies. We're good to go. We can create a new movie. Title. Release date. It was sometime in 1976, right? What's wrong with having to type in the genre? Yeah, it should be selecting from a list of genres, right? Because I have to type in sci-fi. What if someone types in sci-fi with a dash? What if someone has had their mind warped by the Sci-Fi Network and think they spell it S-Y-F-Y? What if someone writes out the full word science fiction? Those would be viewed as different categories. So you would have this with a foreign key, but that's not what they wanted to teach you in this example. All right, and there we go. We could edit. All right, we can delete it, and we can just view the details. So, not bad for a scaffold, right? Not bad for doing work for us. I was thinking, when I've taught this class in the past, prior to using the .NET Core and the scaffolding and all that, to be able to do this took us about through week 13 or 14. All right? So we're only at week 8 now. So we're way ahead of the game. So we're going to take about the next month and a half off. Okay? So, no, just kidding. Just kidding. That'll give us the opportunity to really do a better job with this, is probably the bigger point, and really learn some more stuff and go into more detail. And again, that's the function of a good tool with software. A good tool with software takes basic stuff that you would do in every single application and make it easy for you. Every single application, you're going to have tables that you're going to want to enter data into, see a list of them, update it, display it, right? And it's great that this makes it easy to do that. But, as I said, it doesn't do everything for us. Well, that's why we get the big bucks, right? Because we have to come in and make changes and so on. Let's spend a little bit of time looking at and making some changes to the different files. All right? Let's start with looking at the list. The list is simply movies, which means the name of the file that's relevant here is going to be in movies and /index.html. So if I go into movies and I look at index.html, that's the page I get to when I go to movies. All right? Now, notice, and this is going to be a little tricky, but the word model is going to be used a couple different ways in this case. All right? Model is going to refer to the pages model, and it's also going to refer to the data model. So we have to be sure which one we're talking about this. Now, the model declaration up here is the pages model. All right, you could probably figure that because it says Razor Pages, Pages, Movies, Index Model. So that's the one that we've always seen, right? We've seen this since the first time that we looked at Razor Pages, that each page there was an index model, or there was a model, in this case an index model. All right? And it probably does a lot of the same things. Now notice what this does. This uses all these different pages, and it uses the models, which includes the movie.cs. The movie.cs, if you remember, was the model that we created in the movie tutorial. Now, when we create the model, did we create a database when we created the model? No. What created the database?
The scaffolding?
No, the scaffolding created the pages. What created the database is we went to this and typed in update database. First we created a, what was the term that they had for it? Essentially a version of it. The initial, crap, what was that word? Pardon me? Initial create was the name of it, but that, there was a term for it. Migration? I think it was migration, yeah. What that is that provides you a path if you're updating the database, all right? So you initially create the database, you have to go and recreate it and initialize it. It'll give you the SQL statements for that. Each migration then will go in and do an update to update the database to something. So if you have to go and take and apply that to a web server or whatever, then you have the SQL statements to do that. We'll look more at that going forward. But if you can imagine, if you're in development mode, let's say, and I'm working on my test app, I already have a version of this application running with a version of a database, let's say, the initial beta test version of it, right? I come back and make changes to it. I add tables, I add columns, I change relationships, whatever. I need to be able to go and update that database. And that's what those migrations are for. So you can go and update the database on the production site with the changes that you made on the development site. Okay? But anyhow, this model isn't the database. This model is sort of mapped to the database. When we run that update database, essentially what we do is we create a database that has this table in it. Public ID is the primary key. Title. We define for date that we only want the date part. We don't want the date and time. So in other words, when we entered the date that Star Wars was released, we didn't have to put out like midnight or 2:30 p.m. or whatever. We just put in the date. A string for genre, and a decimal for price. When we create the database, then when we update the database, that actually goes and creates the database. So let's see what our model does. All right, our page model, that is. It doesn't have a lot of code in it. It has all that sort of initialization, what we had before, but it also has a function to get as a property of movie. All right, we've defined a property of movie, and that is defined as a list of movies, an I list of movies. All right, and we have a get and a set. This is a code that actually retrieves the movies from the database, and it gives us an I list. What is an I list, you might ask? Well, let's look. An I list is a collection of objects that can be individually accessed by index. It's sort of like an array. All right? I don't think it's important to go over the details right now of the difference, but effectively it's an array. It's a list of movies. So that's what this get function gives us. That's what this get and set functions give us, rather. It allows us to access a list of movies. The property is called movie, and it consists of a list of movies as defined in this file. So, the get method in the model, page model, has something called movie, a property called movie, that gives us a list of movie objects in the database, from the database. That's about all there is. The other function is an asynchronous get. An asynchronous get is used for AJAX. All right? And we'll probably talk about AJAX later on, especially now that we've freed up 4 or 5 weeks of our time, right? So we should have time to come back and talk more about AJAX now. AJAX is a different way for a web server and a client to communicate, whereas instead of requesting an entire page and getting back an entire page, you request some data and get back some data. And you use that to reformat the current page that you're on. Okay, let's go look at the index and see what it does. All right. HTML, display name for model, model movie 0, title. All right. What do you suppose that's doing? Just look at its position in the code. All right, we'll see you in lab. I'll go open the door, then I'll come back for my files, then I'll be back in there.